At the heart of Willesden High School, a secret lurks in the shadows. Join us as we uncover the mystery of descendants of witches as Olivia's world falls apart, and the lines between reality and nightmare blur. What is real and what is the work of evil? Let's find out. Here is Descendants of Witches EP14. Thank you for your likes and subscriptions. Hope to see your comments in the comment section. 228 Wilson I. Wilson Stevenson I arrived at the Church of Willesden, his lips curving into a playful smirk. He trotted past the luscious green grass as his royal red mantle billowed in the autumn breeze. The chapel that rose above the ground was beautiful, made of pristine ivory stone and colorful stained glass. The early morning blue sky shone down on the statue of the Virgin and her child, a sign of love, hope, and chaste. The exterior was in the shape of a cross, while a spire made of glistening ceramic bricks directed his eyes towards the heavens. This inspired a range of thoughts and emotions to swirl in Wilson. He recalled his coronation ceremony that took place in this holy cathedral a year ago. The entire kingdom was present at the prestigious ceremony, but only the wealthiest of his family and friends were invited to witness the prince receiving God's blessings and transforming into a king. The peasants and women simply stood outside the chapel, peering through the stained windows. Such lowly life was not allowed to witness a divine ceremony like that. His royal guards pushed open the heavy iron-bound doors, and Wilson entered, gracing God's presence. His light brown hair that sometimes appeared blonde in the sunlight swished dramatically when he entered. Wilson adjusted the heavy gold crown that always adorned his head, a symbol for his status. His jewel-green eyes glimmered amongst the candlelight of the parish, as his heartbeats matched the rhythm of the children's soft hymns. It was as if his presence told God, "I am here, Father. I am above the people, but I am below thou." Moving through the passage, the quiet air tinctured with the scent of incense, burning candles, and the fresh smell of Anglican prayer books flooded his senses. The brightly lit passage with a floor of encaustic tiles and white-painted walls ran through the west end of the church. The vestry was the first room on the left, and the central nave of the church was straight ahead. Wilson grinned as he approached the altar of the nave, greeting the Cardinal of the Church of Willesden. The wide room was decorated with Norman arches, with tall and proud marble pillars supporting them. The sunshine shone through the colorful stained glass windows, casting an illuminating glow onto the sacred altar. His footsteps sounded graceful against the ceramic tiles, as they were the only ones that echoed. As he passed the empty wooden benches that faced the altar, he scanned the room for the singing children. Their voices were like angels, high and graceful notes soaring over the clouds, singing for God only. Not here. Perhaps they are harmonizing in the vestry room. Your Majesty, the Cardinal said, bowing down to his king when he arrived. To what may I owe the pleasure of thy company? He asked, a lopsided grin plastered on his wrinkled face. The old man wore a simple white cap, although a fringe of gray-white hair around his mottled scalp was peeking out of the rims. His floor-length white cassock draped over his feet, gliding against the varnished ground in swift movements. It was attached to a red pellegrina and girded with a fringed white fascia, reflecting his lavish lifestyle. Wilson solemnly nodded, one arm raised to his chest, and the other resting on the sheath of his sword. Cardinal Wichard, he greeted, adjusting his belt made of gold. I have come to ask thou to do me a favor, the king began, scrutinizing the cardinal's wizened face and his hunched back. I serve thou and the royal family, your Majesty. I shall do anything for thee. Although do remember that I am God's messenger. Thou art merely a king. A young one at that, Cardinal Wichard gloated, flashing Wilson a toothless smile. God's messenger. Thou art not a pope yet, he internally scoffed. Wilson masked his disgust towards the old rag of a man by clenching his jaw and forcing a smile. Of course. He heartily chuckled, twirling the gold cord that strung his red surcoat between his thumbs. He twisted and pressed against the cord harshly, imagining the cardinal's face in between his thumbs. Anyway, Wilson said, allowing the harmony of the children's sweet voices to soothe his boiling blood. I come to ask for thou help in these dire times. I have heard word that although the pagans have joined the church, they still practice pagan traditions and rituals. Cardinal Wichard chucked, his sagged and wrinkled face twitching disgustingly. Ah yes. I assume thou have come to me seeking help regarding this issue. They act like sorcerers and it is scaring the common people. Wilson hesitantly nodded, biting his tongue to stop from going on a rampage. Yes, the magic they practice in the rural areas of this kingdom is heretical and threatens the future existence of the church. Is there anything that can be done? He asked, gripping the cord tightly in a forceful attempt to suppress groaning out loud. I cannot believe my chancellors urged me to seek his help. The cardinal pondered for a moment, pursing his chapped and dry lips. Inquisition. We shall call for an inquisition. For the purpose of doing away with, he proposed, grinning. I shall suggest unto the Pope, my dearest friend, to order an inquisition within the Catholic Church. It shall be used to root out and punish heresy throughout Europe and the Americas under civil law. That shall get rid of our pagan problem, and it has the added benefit of persecuting the Jews and Muslims too. Wilson widened his eyes, impressed by the cardinal's suggestion. Slowly, a grin spread across his face as he loosened his grip on the gold cord. I must say, that is an intelligent suggestion, Cardinal Wichard, the king commented, his green eyes shining. I suppose I have underestimated thy knowledge. Cardinal Wichard smugly nodded, flattered by the compliment. I shall arrange for the commencement of this act, as long as thou sign a treaty, your majesty. Of course, that is not a problem at all, Wilson exclaimed, and the two men exchanged mischievous glances. Then they shared a gleeful laugh while shaking hands. Both had a glint of distaste for the other in their eyes, but also an understanding. They served the church, and to perform that duty well, they must cooperate and set their grudges aside. As the choir of children sung their hymns and the two men chuckled amongst each other, a lost soul wandered into the church. Tell me, your majesty, art thou considering giving thy seed to thy queen? An heir is needed, the cardinal remarked, striking a new conversation. Wilson sighed and shrugged, his distaste towards the cardinal rising again. Of all the topics he could ask about, the old rag asks this. We tried, but it seems I am unable to produce a child, he answered, hesitant about the fact that he was admitting this out loud. Although I do desperately want a son. Perhaps soon, God willing. The cardinal shook his head. No. It is thy wife that is unable to conceive. Blame it on her, for it is true. What use is there for a woman if she cannot produce? I suggest thou sleep with another, your majesty, he said, clasping his creased hands together. What else is a woman but a foe to friendship, an inescapable punishment, a domestic danger, and an evil of nature painted in her fair colors? Therefore, if it is a sin to divorce her when she ought to be kept, it is indeed necessary torture. For either thou commit adultery by divorcing her, or thou must endure her daily strife. Wilson widened his eyes and began to further question why, when suddenly a gush of cold air swept through the room. The lost soul entered the central nave, and the light that was illuminating the altar previously suddenly diminished. The moment her smeared feet stepped on the pristine floor, the children's melodies halted. The king knitted his feathery eyebrows at the abrupt halt of music. He glanced around the vacant room, wondering what caused the daylight to dim. Where have the children's voices gone? He asked the cardinal. The cardinal raised his eyebrow, peering at the young king strangely. There are no children here. It is not Sunday. Wilson quietly gasped, a pit of uneasiness forming in his stomach. Before he could wonder why he was the only one who heard the children's song, he sensed a dark presence standing behind him. The king tightened his grip around the gold cord hanging from his surcoat with clammy hands. The atmosphere within the church suddenly thickened, and the absent choir created a void in his heart. The king slowly turned around and his gaze cruised the figure of a strange woman. Her hair was long and string-like, tumbling down her back like an obsidian waterfall. It covered most of her hollow face, but Wilson could see two blinking eyes peeking out from the jet-black nest. A ragged white knee-length tunic was the only piece of clothing draped around her smeared body, the excess fabric swishing between her bony legs. Her head tilted to the side as she gazed at the king with a confused expression. The king's eyes traveled down to her feet, that was blistered and bare as it absent-mindedly scratched against the sacred floor of God's haven. Her most defining feature was the piercing violet eyes that were wide with helplessness, yet glinting with fierce power. After a moment of stillness and bewilderment, the cardinal stepped forward. Who art thou, and what art thou doing at the church when it is not currently in session? Cardinal Wichard sternly asked, glowering at the intruder. How dare thou refuse to bow in my presence? Wilson chimed in, shooting the woman an inferior look once he realized she was no harm. I am the King of Willesden. Peasants such as thou must bow before me and my family if thou receives the honor of crossing paths with us. Even my retarded younger brother, thou must bow to. The peasant woman blinked owlishly and with feigned innocence as if she couldn't understand what they were saying. She parted her leathery lips, but only a croak escaped her mouth. Suddenly, the cardinal laughed boisterously. King Wilson, I turned to look at the cardinal and cocked an eyebrow up with surprise. Is there something funny about this intruder, Cardinal? He asked, quietly ridiculing the old man's gasps for air in between chuckles. Not so young anymore, Cardinal. Yes, this woman is funny. She looks like she emerged from the suburbs and bathed herself in dirt. It is comical to me how such lowly life like her aimlessly enters this church with not an ounce of intelligence. The cardinal roared, rolling his bald head skywards as he chuckled. The king grinned alongside him and turned to eye the woman demurely. Thou art correct. She is hideous. She looks like a witch, Wilson pointed out, biting the edge of his smirk in a vain attempt to keep his creeping grin at bay. The intention behind his perking lips wasn't something that could easily be assessed by others, however. It did have a hint of mischief. Cardinal Wichard clapped his hands and nodded, mirthful tears streaming down his saggy face. Yes, she looks like the pagan witches we were talking about purging. He mocked, wagging his finger at the nonchalant woman. Wilson grinned and joined his laughter, unable to contain himself any longer. As the men demeaned and taunted the woman, she smiled at them indifferently. It was a haunting and knowing smile that displayed her crooked yellow teeth. I am a pagan witch, she simply stated, in a raspy voice that was suitable for summoning the devil. The king and his cardinal stared at the woman with widened eyes and raised eyebrows, halting their laughter. She speaks, the cardinal whispered, in anything but disbelief. His tone of voice suggested that he was forcing his shock, with the intentions of mocking her. The men exchanged surprised glances for a moment, until the king slapped the cardinal's back, guffawing. A witch thou claim? The king howled, stepping towards the peasant woman with a wide grin that spread across his face. He grabbed her slender shoulders and shook her back and forth intensely. She's a witch, Cardinal. A witch. Send her off to my chancellors and knights. Have her tried for heresy. He demanded, as his hands roamed around her scrawny figure. Her life shall be spared, although this damned she-devil must be taught a lesson. Cardinal Wichard grinned evilly and grabbed the woman's smeared tunic, tugging it harshly. This woman shall die. Die, thou pagan witch! He exclaimed, pulling her flaky hair in front of God's divine eyes. Shame her! Shame this witch! King Wilson, I ordered, grabbing the hem of her tunic. He hastily decided to humiliate her himself, simply for the superior adrenaline rush he received when doing so. He lifted her smeared tunic that was originally white but had been ruined by years of weather and current. The woman displayed no reaction on her smeared face, and it was amusing all the more for the men. The cardinal roared with laughter at the sight of the woman's lifted dress that revealed her bare bony legs. This is what this witch deserves. The king shall spare you, woman, by allowing thou to leave. Run away and tell thy pagan friends to stop performing pagan rituals and traditions, or else thou shalt be punished. Thank me, O pagan witch. The king sneered, outstretching his arms dramatically. For I have done thou an incredible favor. I am a pagan witch, she hissed, as her violet eyes glowed sinisterly. Do you wish to be cursed? She asked, although the king was unsure whether she was being sardonic or not. Curse? The king? The cardinal exclaimed, laughing at the woman hysterically. I shall believe it only with my eyes, woman, not with thou words. The cardinal slapped the king's back, however this time the king was not laughing with him. He simply stared at the woman that stood before him. Her eyes glimmered vigilantly, telling Wilson that she was speaking the truth. Her head was tilted and her lanky arms dangled by her sides as a tiny grin curved on her bruised mouth. Wilson slowly reeled his hand off her figure and rested his thumbs between the golden cord, a slight tremor in his hands. Art thou truly planning to curse me? Have I upset thou? He spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Fear swirled throughout his veins, and he desperately longed for the children's choir to resume, no matter whether it was simply a figment of his imagination or some other mysterious force. These pagans are a force not to be reckoned with. All the more reason to crucify them, Wilson thought, anxiously rubbing the cord between his thumbs as he hoped that which was simply bluffing. The look in her powerful otherworldly eyes told him otherwise. Idideridebit me decipis me. Ut maledisserit tibi ego domus patris to ahirdem perpetuo facere poterit, the witch chanted, her lips curving into a playful grin. Her voice was bold and echoed throughout the vacant church, her words staining the pure white walls. It bounced off the altar and the stained glass, striking the king. Wilson frantically scanned the room, wondering if some sort of light or deformity appeared. Nothing. Nothing had changed. The cardinal still stood beside the king, and the king appeared to have not been physically impacted by her chants. The room was eerily quiet, but that was only because the men had stopped laughing. What did thou do?" Wilson whispered, clenching his fists as his heart rapidly hammered against his chest. Despair flooded his tremoring body, because some part of him did not want to know. "Henceforth the royal Stevenson family will be unable to produce any heir," she said, licking her dry lips with her serpent-like tongue. "Good day, Wilson Stevenson." King Wilson I blinked, and when his emerald eyes fluttered open, the witch had disappeared. After a moment of deadly silence, the children that were nowhere to be seen resumed their singing, in a slightly more ominous tone. It was as if nothing had happened at all, yet the stains of her words could never be washed off nor forgotten, for centuries to come. 29 William I. Yes, yes. My king brother is a cruel man. However, what can I do? He thinks of me as a retard, simply because I enjoy milking the cows in the royal garden to pass my time. Prince William Stevenson I scoffed, his embellished shoes tapping the polished floor impatiently. Your Highness, you are indeed right. The prince's sire, Patur Iohannes II, swiftly replied. Patur suddenly jumped up when William's eyebrows shot up at that comment. The frail man shook his head frenziedly, which caused the scroll he held to drop on the floor. Forgive me, Your Highness. I meant you are right about His Majesty being, indifferent regarding these situations. I did not mean to say that you are correct about His Majesty thinking of you as a retard. You are not a retard for enjoying the common people's activities, Your Highness. Patur Iohannes II squeaked, his frail body quivering with nervousness. William let out a deliberately loud sigh and traced his pale fingers around the gold carvings on his throne chair, which was significantly shorter than his brother's. His elbow rested on the golden arms and he hung his head to the side, hoping his disengagement towards the conversation could be seen. Never mind that. I will not waste my time doing my king brother's dirty work and cleaning up after his drunken mistakes. That is final, Sir Patur, he declared to his sire. Patur groaned and picked up the fallen scroll that had rolled off to the corner of the golden throne room. Once he retrieved the scroll, the prince looked down on Patur, as he drummed his fingers against the arms of his throne board. Patur cleared his throat and rubbed his clammy palms against his leather pants, desperate to persuade the prince. But Your Highness, if I may add, this is an urgent task that only you can fulfill. Oh, spare me the lies, Sir Patur. You and I both know King Wilson was simply too lazy, and possibly drunk, to complete a task like this, Prince William said, waving his hands dismissively. Forget about it, Patur. Let us milk the cows together instead of engaging in useless conversation such as this, he suggested, as he rolled his head skyward and stared at the intriguing paintings above. Sunlight shone through from the panes of glass overhead, illuminating the golden room. How dreadfully boring, he thought as his jade eyes fixedly studied the fresco paintings. The art dominated the ceilings and each stroke had a smudging quality that rendered the image watery, like a reflection in a rippled puddle. The painted common men tilted their heads up at the bright heavens, their eyes shining with ravish. The glorious yet mundane angels, popes and saints looked down at the people to bless. Kings and royalty were featured alongside these religious figures, and William vividly recalled his elder brother requesting this unflattering addition years ago. After the royal artist finished painting, he and his brother stared up at the basilica for hours, awestruck by the intricate shades and rich textures of the dyes. The young Wilson would always point out how divine the kings and popes appeared, worshipping the angelic clouds above. However, William didn't care at all about the repetitive saints that lined the ceiling. His eyes were desperate for something interesting, and when they landed on some strange people along the sides of the art, the child was immediately hooked. These distinct figures deeply contrasted against the rest of the godlike artwork, as if Satan had sneaked into their castle one night and added them himself. There was a woman at the bottom of the fresco, lying provocatively next to a nude man with bat wings. Why is there an image such as this amongst a religious piece of art? William still wondered to this day, scratching his head. His keen eyes roamed the ceiling and found a group of menacing women hiding behind a man, in a position that suggested they were preparing to pounce the oblivious man. Such big noses those women have, William recalled thinking, as his eyes probed the bat that hovered in the air beside them. Patur cleared his throat, which snapped the prince back into reality. William leveled his gaze towards his scrawny sire and sighed. He knew his sire was having a hard time because of him, yet he continued to refuse his requests anyway. It is the only amusement I get from this drab castle, he reasoned. Come along now. I'm tired of these shiny walls, it is too much for my weak eyes. William grunted, standing up from his throne chair and whizzing past Patur. His dark green cape billowed behind him as he ran his hands through his brownish blonde hair, proud of himself for getting away with another stupidly insane royal duty. Why, Your Highness, may I suggest that if you choose to complete King Wilson's unfinished task of persuading the farmers, that would mean you have stepped into his role. You would technically have the powers and abilities of a king, even if it is just for an hour. Sir Patur exclaimed animatedly as he clutched the scroll to his leathered chest. Prince William halted in his tracks, suddenly interested in what Patur had to say. Patur grinned at that response and adjusted his beige flat cap. Isn't that what you always wanted, Your Highness? To be king, even it was just for a day. Prince William's eyebrows shot up as he slowly turned around, and for once, he was speechless. William knew very well that Patur always twisted his words in a way that would cause him to fulfill his required duty as prince. However, no matter how many times he does it, it would always persuade William. I did not know Sir Patur could be this intelligent, was all he could think for a split second as his brain registered the opportunity laid out in front of him. William scratched his chin deep in thought. Is it truly worth stepping in my brother's unflattering leather boots, so I can apologize to those idiotic farmers on his behalf? It took him only a couple of seconds to come to a conclusion. So be it. Prince William huffed, a grin twirling on his chiseled face. I shall complete my king brother's task, and prove to the common people that I am indeed more capable than him. He boasted, revealing his pearl-white teeth. Excellent, Your Highness. I shall arrange for the farmers to arrive at the palace, and talk with you. I am confident that you will not disappoint me, Your Highness, he earnestly said, beaming at the man. Sir Patur knew Prince William for a long time, including every detail about his lazy behavior and larger-than-life dreams. This wasn't the first time he claimed to take over his brother's role, and it wouldn't be the last. However, it relieved the scrawny sire every time he shouted this. It was the younger prince's way of agreeing to performing his required duty. William ignored him and outstretched his arms, the sun's rays illuminating his chivalrous armor. Patur, you might as well begin referring to me as Your Majesty. Besides, William is more of a kingly name. The royal family is a load of crap. The auburn-haired farmer roared, clutching a basket of baguettes. Ye kings and princes govern Willesden in the most atrocious way possible. The system ye created only benefits ya. He shouted as his ruddy cheeks heated with passion. Hear, hear. The older farmer yelled in agreement, adjusting his beige conical hat. I still remember the day King Wilson promised to help us farmers. He promised us eons of land and fat animals. But we have received nothing. Nothing. The old man croaked, wagging his crinkled finger at the prince. Prince William sighed loudly, as distaste piled on top of his tongue. No wonder Wilson did not bother with them, he thought, tapping his feet impatiently against the pedestal his throne stood upon. Instead of sitting on his shorter throne, the prince sat on the king's chair, which was one of the few benefits that came out of his agreement with Patur. The chair he sat upon was carved of fine oak, crested with several jewels and decorative metals that formed an elegant coat of arms. The seat of the king was impressive, and the prince's was merely a stool in comparison. It infuriated William every time Wilson placed his pompous buttocks on the divine throne, but he forced himself to show gratitude towards this golden opportunity he accepted by silently grinding his teeth against each other. Sir Patour leaned forward when he sensed Prince William falling out of the conversation. "Your Highness, apologize to them immediately and then persuade them to give us their wheat," he hurriedly whispered into his ear. William rolled his eyes skyward and groaned out loud. "I refuse to apologize for my brother's mistakes," he protested. The prince twisted his dark cape around his fist, desperately wishing for these men to leave so that he could bask in the greatness of the king's throne, alone. Perhaps I am just as conceited as my brother, William wondered for a moment. Never mind, this is an entirely different situation, he thought, filling his blank head with insignificant talks. It was something he usually did when he was bored out of his mind, or when he was not happy with what he desired. Before Patour could scold the prince for protesting, the farmers beat him to it. "Like I said, the royal family is a load of crap," the auburn-haired farmer repeated, his brown eyes raked with fury. William cocked his head and blinked at the farmer with a sarcastic innocence. "Those leather overalls are a load of crap," he quietly retaliated, although it was loud enough for the 4 people gathered in the throne room to hear. "Hear that?" the farmer with the smeared overalls exclaimed, his knuckles turning white from gripping his basket of bland bread tightly. "His Royal Highness," he began, spitting in a mocking voice, "is just like his king brother. A load of crap. I did not expect the king to stoop this low. The puny man was too much of a coward to face us after mocking us, so he forced his retarded younger brother to apologize for him. Yet his brother did not even apologize yet." The farmer continued to ramble. The prince clicked his tongue, and he could sense Patour stiffen beside him, already predicting what the unruly prince was going to say next. "How dare that peasant go as far as to associate myself with that man, and call us the same? Y'all are a load of crap," the older farmer shouted, agreeing. The man attempted to look up at the prince, but his back was hunched so low that he couldn't even lift his head up. William would have found it comical on any other day, but currently he was too furious. "Calm down, men. It is my king brother you shall ridicule, not myself. I am your friend. Let us sort this without quarreling," the prince interjected nonchalantly. This unexpected behavior earned a shocked expression from Patour, whose body was trembling with too much anxiousness to even utter a remark. The 2 farmers that stood below him shot the prince a questionable look, but decided to allow the prince to continue out of curiosity. William smiled and crossed one leg over the other, as he began to enjoy acting kingly. He forcibly suppressed the boiling rage inside him, so that his plan to fulfill his duty would result in success. "Good. I detest my king brother as much as you common people do. Believe it or not," William huffed, eyeing the men carefully. "I deeply apologize for the way he ridiculed and created a laughing stock out of you hard-working men, the other day. He was drunk and had possibly made love with one of his cranky mistresses," he added, hoping his light-hearted tone would achieve the men's approval. The old man simply snorted while the younger farmer placed his hands on his hips and glowered at the prince. "Oh well. One cannot please them all. I too enjoy farming," the prince remarked, attempting to bring the men into the conversation. "Milking cows and mowing land has always soothed me," he added, truthfully. "As a pastime, I assume," the auburn-haired farmer snickered. "For us it is a life's duty. Your royalty will never understand." William nodded, pretending to understand. "I see. Well, why don't I make a proposal with you and the other Willesden farmers?" he asked smugly. This caught the attention of the men, as they exchanged a glance amongst each other before peering at the prince curiously. William grinned as pride burst through his veins. "What an exciting day. I have never realized this until now, but I do have a skillful way with words," he gloated internally. "If you men could share half of your crops with the palace, I shall personally reward all of you with eons of land and fat animals," William said, puffing his chest outwards. The old man slapped his thighs and guffawed. "A load of crap. A load of crap," he chirped like a giddy toddler who recently learned how to curse. William raised his eyebrows eloquently.
"I disagre, man."
"It will not be a load of crap if I give it to you now," he said, turning to smile at Sir Patour. Sir Patour gulped as his limbs quivered with so much intensity William wondered if the man was going to melt in his boots. Sir Patur, bring my diligent friends their gifts immediately. The farmer stared in awe as Patur jumped up and squeaked, before rushing out of the throne room to retrieve some documents confirming their agreement. Prince William craned his neck and met the farmer's gaze, and he shot them a wide grin. I look forward to eating your delicious baguettes.
Tankya, ya Royal Highness.
You're so kind. Too kind, the young farmer exclaimed, as he dropped to his knees and clasped his hands. It was as if he was praising God, because that's what William felt like. It's amusing how quickly these peasants shift behaviors when gifted with riches, he thought, breaking into a wide grin. He modestly nodded to the farmers, although on the inside he wanted to shout, "Indeed. Bow down to me, for I am your king." The prince didn't care whether that was a far-fetched fantasy. It was something he always wanted, to have men praise him and shake their clasped hands with glee. "You're much kinder than the king," the old man exclaimed, shaking a fist in the air sluggishly, as he was physically unable to do any other gesture. Prince William leaned back in his brother's throne and allowed those words to soak into his bones. His grin widened into that of a child's, and the smile deepened into his emerald eyes, reflecting off his body like a halo of happiness. Much kinder than the king. Of course, I am much kinder than any king in history thus far. Not even my brother or dead father could ever achieve this level of approval. Much kinder than the king. My retarded brother. I refuse to believe it. Old man, take back thy words instantly, or thee shall be hung by my hand. King Wilson, I boomed from across the throne room. Prince William's face fell faster than it had been up, and he shifted his gaze towards the entrance of the room. Sir Patur stood alongside King Wilson I and Cardinal Wichard, quivering and bowing rapidly. It seemed as though Patur had unfortunately crossed paths with the two worst men in the entire kingdom of Willesden, and William felt pity for his young sire's position. Although had he been in the boy's place, he would simply walk past them without paying his respects. "William, may I ask what art thou doing sitting upon my throne?" Wilson seethed, stomping towards his younger brother. His red mantle whipped the air with a lion's ferocity and his firm lips curved downwards, into a frown. William's eyebrows shot up as he swiftly slid off his throne, crossing his fingers in the hopes that he would be able to dash away from his brother's rage. "I was stepping in your unflattering leather boots and fixing your drunken mistake from the other night," William retorted, as he bounced down the ivory pedestal steps. When his feet landed on the ground, he placed his hands on his armored hips and stuck his tongue out at his older brother. King Wilson scoffed and aggressively placed his pompous buttocks upon his gold-encrusted throne that, to William, warranted a finer buttock. "Thou art a grown man, William, yet thou act like a child," he sneered, clutching the gold cord that hung from his royal surcoat and twisting it violently. Before the prince could argue with his egomaniacal brother any further, the cardinal interjected. "Your Majesty, your Highness, I suggest thou halt thy quarrel and listen to this important matter," Cardinal Wichard said, waving his wrinkled fists as if he had more authority than them. He technically did, but William and his brother chose to ignore that. It seemed to be the only thing they had in common. William suddenly realized amid this commotion. "I shall spare thee, so leave at once." King Wilson abruptly bellowed at the farmers that stood dumbfounded in the middle of the room. "Sir Patur, escort these undeserving peasants out. What about our land that you promised?" The brown-haired farmer squeaked, but one look from the king told them that they had nowhere near the permission nor power to simply converse with the sober king. As Sir Patur escorted the sulking farmers, Prince William eyes his brother with amusement. "You are quite angry today. More than usual, I have observed. Did you sleep with one of your cranky mistresses again?" He taunted, bouncing on the balls of his feet. Judging by their deadpan expressions, it seemed that his elder brother and the cardinal were not in the mood. The feisty prince rolled his eyes and crossed his arms, wondering what the urgent deal was. "Would someone kindly inform me what this important matter is? I was in the middle of striking a significant political deal with those pleasant farmers," he remarked, tapping his stylish boots impatiently, once again. "All these men ever do is ruin my fun." "Do not take my next words lightly, Your Highness," the cardinal said, gesturing at the prince to move forward. He waved his cloaked arms at such a slow pace that it caused the prince's eyeballs to pop out of his face with intense disdain. The prince huffed and placed one foot on the pedestal step after reluctantly shuffling forward. "Do not treat me like a child, Cardinal," he retorted, exactly in the way a child would. "It appears His Majesty has angered a witch," the Cardinal bluntly stated, sighing and shooting the king a look of disapproval. Now, if her words ring true, she seemed to have cursed the royal family. The prince's mouth curved into a jeering grin, and he did not waste the opportunity to ridicule his brother. "A witch. Mayhaps you slept with this woman and did not please her correctly, so she turned witch-like towards you," he quipped, dragging on the conversation for his pure enjoyment. "Tell me, my dearest brother, does she have a big hanging nose with a collection of warts and pus? This is a dire matter, William," his brother roared, gripping the arms of his throne with fury. His flaring green eyes probed William, although the young man did not flinch. He was accustomed to his brother's rage, so it did not intimidate William anymore. Although it sure as hell scared everyone else in the kingdom. William scrutinized his brother in return, squinting his eyes so that they were narrow. He and his brother looked very much alike. Too alike, some have said. Their eyes both glistened in the sunlight, like chips of emerald ice, whilst their chestnut brown hair swayed like a shadow. Although they were not twins, as his brother was 5 years older. It was just a 5-year difference, yet those 5 years truly determined his fate, and it angered him to some extent. He and his elder brother had never been extremely close, as their rivalry had begun the moment William sprouted from between his queen mother's legs, red-faced and squalling. Apart from staring up at the ceiling together occasionally, the two princes roamed around the castle performing activities. Prince Wilson would train as a knight with their king father. In preparation for the eventual day, he would sit upon the throne. Prince William was left alone to sulk in the royal cattle farm, and his only friends were the fat cows and the milk they pissed from their pink udders. William craned his neck upwards and sighed. "Understood, brother. Although what I do not understand is the situation with the witch. I have rarely heard of them. I'm curious, did this witch curse our family with white or black magic?" he asked sarcastically, disbelieving the cardinal's words. "That old rag of a man is vain and foppish. I shall not fall for the lies he spews," he indifferently scoffed to himself. "Black magic," the cardinal replied seriously. The prince raised his eyebrows as many questions crossed his mind, but he allowed the cardinal to continue. "She chanted some words from a heretical religion, I assume. She claims to be a pagan witch. Those pagans aren't holding on to their rituals and magical traditions from a long time past, despite the fact they have converted to Christianity," he spat, with disgust in his tone. "Are you suggesting that my kind and diligent king brother mocked a woman, who happened to be a witch, and now my family is cursed?" Prince William inquired, still in disbelief and choosing to mask his bafflement with endless sardonic remarks. "If what you are telling me is not a joke, Cardinal, then may I ask what exactly has she cursed?" he asked, pursing his lips with feigned innocence. "Although, I do hope that this is a joke, because that would be hilarious, as I have never imagined that the cardinal would trick me today," he jested. "The damn woman rendered the Stevenson family unable to produce children," King Wilson shouted, infuriated with his jokester of a brother. Prince William widened his eyes for a moment and then chuckled mockingly. "What did she do? Chop your genitals?" he sniggered, taking the matter lightly. "I recall believing for at least a decade of my life that the cardinal is secretly a eunuch. Perhaps the thoughts from my boyhood were indeed true." Cardinal Wichard shot the prince a disgusted look, with a mixture of absolute hatred. Although William had to admit, the old man masked it well. "She cursed thee with words, your highness. Pagan words. Do thou realize the problem with this curse?" the cardinal explained, heated. William shrugged, his arms crossed over his armored chest. "The only problem I see is the fact that my dearest brother will be unable to sleep with his mistresses if he has been castrated," he commented, looking up at his dearest brother and forcibly shooting him a pitiful expression. "His actual wife too, I suppose, although she is quite a doxy. The problem is that there will be no heir for the damn throne." King Wilson exploded, having enough of William's sly and curt-side remarks. "This includes thou, William. We art all cursed. And I have not been castrated, since thou art too dim to realize that on thy own." William paused for a second to register all this information. "Are you serious?" he questioned, scanning the men. The exasperated look Cardinal Wichard and King Wilson gave him answered his question. "Oh my! How shall we go about this? If there is no heir to the throne, how will our family continue to reign? I suppose after my dearest brother dies, the crown shall be passed unto myself, but what about after that?" He mused, biting his lip with anxiousness about the entire situation. "Damn you, Wilson. What were you thinking, creating a laughingstock out of a witch? And did you truly have to drag me alongside you?" The king clicked his tongue, irritated by his brother for a million reasons, but the matters at hand were more important than their sibling squabbles. He rubbed his temples with his thumbs, frustrated. "We have to find that damn witch and beg her to undo the curse," Wilson proposed. "Give her anything she wants. A feast, land, riches. Anything." Cardinal Wichard nodded in agreement. "Indeed. Prince William, I assign that task to thou," he declared, turning to look at the prince. His jaw dropped to the floor with surprise. "Why must I? This is my dearest brother's mistake after all. Punish him," he exclaimed, shooting his king brother a pointed expression, who smugly sneered down at him. "And how will I find the damn witch? No one barely knows a thing about them. I suggest thou search the church library and ask around the nearby villages," the cardinal said, folding his hands neatly. "It shall be an exciting venture, your highness." Prince William groaned and he hung his head, sulking. "How can you call me your highness yet send me to the common people's village? And will my king brother simply sit atop that throne until that witch undo the curse?" King Wilson glowered at his younger brother as he straightened his back and adjusted his golden crown. "I shall sit here until the end of time, and only when I am given a son will I get off my throne," he declared. Prince William hung his arm around his sire's bony shoulders as they trotted through the church library. Truly, William was the only one trotting, whilst Sir Patur quivered underneath his heavy strength, trudging tentatively. "Why, your highness, it would be wise if we walk normally so that we can scour through this library with ease," his sire stammered, whimpering underneath the prince's weight. "No need to stammer, Patur, nor give a logical reason when asking me to do something simple," William quipped as he approached a bookshelf. William straightened his position and slapped Patur's back, which caused the poor boy to tumble forward, the leather-bound books in his grasp falling alongside him. "What book are you exactly searching for, your highness?" Patur asked, collecting his heavy books and brushing the dust off his leather robes. William cocked his head to the side and forcibly laughed, hoping that it would drown his sorrows. "I am searching for something my king brother specifically requested, so unfortunately I cannot disclose that information to even a loyal sire like you," William sighed, sifting through the dusty books. "However, I called for your assistance with navigating the library. I recall that I have not even read a book since my boyhood. I was required to read some books that included saga in the title. Egil, Jal and such," he explained, waving his hands dismissively. Sir Patur swiftly nodded. "Of course, your highness. I am undeserving," he exclaimed as he stood up to rush to the prince's side. As William randomly picked books with covers that he liked, Patur grabbed his favorites and gushed repeatedly about the thrill of the reading experience and such. William allowed his sire to ramble because he truly had not a clue as to what he was saying. He nodded and pretended to listen as he sifted through the pages of a book with a fresh black hardcover. The rustling of the thin papers amused him, for whatever strange reason, and the prince curiously glanced down at the book. "Perhaps reading a couple of paragraphs shall not hurt my long-standing record," he thought. However, only blank pages stared up at him. William quietly huffed to himself, flipping through the pages. As he continued to sift through the pages, he noticed that they were all eerily blank, like how the green banks would turn white during winter. "How unusual," he muttered, leaning against a wooden bookcase as he quickly became enthralled with the flipping. After many wispy pages, still no text or print could be spotted on the paper. "Your highness, is something wrong?" Sir Patur asked, noticing the frown on the prince's face. He returned a couple of books that were in his grasp as he peered at the prince with wonder. Prince William looked up and pursed his lips, turning the book over to show Patur. "There's nothing on these pages," he said, pointing at the blank sheets. "I wonder why one would bind a book that does not have text." "Your highness, I do not understand what you mean," Patur said, peering at the pages closely. "There are many words on that page, P'Tur nonchalantly commented, scratching his ruddy chin. William widened his eyes with bewilderment as he quickly flipped through the pages again. His heart dropped to the floor and he blinked his eyes rapidly, but nothing would change the fact that his eyes could not see what was imprinted on the paper. What does it say? Read it to me, Sir P'Tur. Immediately. He frantically ordered, rubbing his eyes with the sides of his balled fists. Sir P'Tur squeaked and nodded, grabbing the book and reading the text out loud.
Understood.
Upon the forest floor woven with ancient tree roots came a light filtered by the bouquet of foliage above. The light was softened, verdant and freshly aromatic, P'Tur read, glancing up at William with concern. Forest. William whispered, gripping the ends of his cloak tightly with his clammy hands. His heart hammered rapidly as his breathing quickened and he stood frozen in panic. Forest, Sir P'Tur repeated in a mentor-like voice, as he had noticed the prince's frantic behavior. Although he was slightly bewildered, he realized that it truly was a familiar occurrence with Willam. Forest. William sighed, the simple words slowly relieving his tension. He unripped the ends of his cloak and straightened his slumped back, clearing his parched throat during the process. Show me the book, he commanded P'Tur after he regained his princely stance. P'Tur nodded and handed him the book, his pudgy face contoured with worry for the prince. William swallowed the lump in his throat and traced his thumbs over the charcoal cover. It was smooth and glossy, although William noticed that there was no title. He bit his lip and opened the book to a random page, holding his breath. To his absolute relief, the text describing the forest shined up at him. William could have sworn that it was not there before, but he decided that fewer questions would be better. Perhaps he was simply insane for a fraction of a second like his brother always claimed. William blinked away the anxiousness and inhaled sharply. He looked up at P'Tur and softly smiled, telling him that there was nothing to be worried about. William peered at the text once more as he released the breath. The top corner of the inky page had a sketch of a small gathering of black and gray trees, alongside the chunky text. Forest. He breathed as his eyes probed the ominously enchanting drawing. Forest. The forest. He suddenly jumped up, shutting the book with excitement. That's where she must be. Prince William entered the bright green forest, hearing only his boots tread and the cracking of twigs underfoot. William grinned to himself as he gazed up at the dark green canopy, that was so alive even the birds sweetly chirped. Only a few fragments of the afternoon sun peeked through the scattered cracks between the looming trees, illuminating the dirt path ahead of him. The path he stomped on was woven with outgrown roots, colorful wildflowers and delicate leaves. The air surrounding him was lush, verdant and majestically aromatic. He slowly trudged forward, absorbing the fragrance of the minty grass and the dampened earth. Each breath he drew was like sipping fresh water, flowing freely into his lungs. After he suppressed the urge to gaze at the forest further, he simply stood in the middle of the lush green and redirected his mind towards his mission. I am such a smart man. What a wonderful trait fit for a king, William thought, placing his hands on his hips as he puffed his chest outwards. The simple realization that a witch's coven must be placed deep within the forest excited William incredibly. There was no need to appear as a maniac in front of the villagers, by asking them the whereabouts of a witch and such. Perhaps books do have some use. When he had hastily rushed out of the castle, William ripped off his shining knight armor and cape, and all that remained was a plain tunic and leather pants. The seams of his clothing rubbed against the damp soil, smearing it with dirt. However, William allowed it to. He reasoned that to find that witch, he must blend in as much as possible. If she truly is a pagan witch, then cautionary measures must be taken. William swept his hands through his light brown hair, chivalrously, and he continued to march through the green forest. He sludged through the mud and recalled that rain had not passed for days, yet the soil remained wet. As time gradually passed by and the deeper he trotted, his arms quivered because of the increasingly chilly air. He hugged his chest and rubbed his back, while the sun that peeked from between the trees dimmed. William knitted his eyebrows with confusion as he wandered through the forest. The trees that sheltered the opening with their canopy of green were slowly turning into lifeless sticks of charcoal. The unfettered light illuminated the scorched ground and the smell of burnt wood wafted up to his nostrils. The prince observed that the depths of the forest were quite ancient. The trees were old and had twisted roots that traveled up to the gray sky. Mere seconds ago, the forest was filled with birdsong and animals that roamed, but now it aged past its former glory. William forcibly gulped the bile forming on the tip of his shivering tongue, and grudgingly trudged further, desperate to find that witch. He wondered if he went a couple of acres of land further, that the forest would perhaps turn into a winter scenery. That thought caused him to stop dead in his tracks, amidst the gloomy and dead forest. Perhaps I should stop here and look around, he hesitantly thought as he peered through the heady fog. Upon the forest floor trees of yesteryear lay, fallen in storms that had been long forgotten. The stubborn prince slumped on one of the fallen bark and rested a hand on his chin. I suppose I was wrong, he sighed, rubbing the temples of his forehead with frustration. As he sat, the cold wind caused tufts of hair to fall over his face. William gritted his chattering teeth and swept his chestnut bangs off his forehead, to no avail. Yet again he was bored. For a moment, he believed that perhaps the Cardinal was correct. This would have been an exciting venture, only if the forest had not suddenly turned grim and witches truly existed. For years, his boredom was an invitation for his brain to play. So he hesitantly let it in, allowing his thoughts to float without direction. William randomly raised his eyes and peered at the cluster of trees in front of him. They were identical to the rest, yet the only difference was that they were thinner, like sticks of charcoal, black and gray. Thick and withering vines circled the cluster like a rope, in a manner that struck out to William. There is no way nature could sweep vines over trees like that, he thought, scratching his chin curiously. He tentatively stepped forward and ripped the vines off the trees, and the limbs of the trees fell to the ground. It seemed that the cluster of trees, similar to the sketch in the book he found, was actually in the form of a hut. It was lopsided and had shrunken to the ground, and was made of entirely dead trees. Mud and the vines seemed to be the only thing supporting it, but now that William had unraveled it like a string, it had opened up like a flower bud. In the middle of the cluster of trees, a woman blinked up at him, her violet eyes sullen. William gasped and recoiled, not expecting a peasant woman to be hidden inside these tiny trunks. She sat on her bottom, with her bruised knees brought up to her chest. Her hair was long and string-like, tumbling down her back like an obsidian waterfall and waving in the chilly wind. The intensely black hair that stuck against her ivory skin made a contrast that only served to make the girl look all the more ghostly and haunting. Her nest of jet-black hair covered most of her hollow face, but William could see a couple of dirt smudges and bruises scattered. A ragged white knee-length tunic was the only piece of clothing draped around her lanky body. Her head tilted to the side as she gazed at the prince with a confused expression. The prince's eyes traveled down to her feet, that was blistered and bare as it absent-mindedly scratched against the twigs that crunched beneath her light weight. She was not particularly attractive, but William reasoned that if she bathed in water then perhaps she would be flattering to look at. Although he had to admit that her most flattering feature was the piercing violet eyes that were wide with helplessness, yet glinting with fierce power. "And may I ask, who are you?" Prince William spurted, after long seconds of silent staring. He clenched his teeth and forced himself to appear nonchalant, but when faced with someone strange and uncanny, it was difficult to not be scared. Her lashes swept up and blinked at him, and it seemed as if she couldn't understand what he was saying. She parted her leathery lips, but only a croak escaped her mouth. "Do you live here, peasant?" he softly asked, kneeling on one knee which dug in the damp soil. He rested his right arm on the propped leg, posing as kingly as possible. "If you do, I suggest you leave immediately. This forest is not an ideal habitat for a frail woman like you. Come with me, and I shall lead you to the nearby village. I have loads of gold as I am an aristocrat. I am willing to buy you a suitable house," William offered, expecting a bow and praise. Instead, the woman coughed. She opened and closed her lips, attempting to speak, so William patiently waited for her answer. After many croaks and hiccups, she managed to form words. "I am a pagan witch," she simply stated, in a raspy voice that was suitable for summoning the devil. Prince William's eyebrows shot up with surprise. "It is her. The pagan witch. How lucky I am. God favors me." William bit his lips to suppress the grin that was forming, and cleared his throat, preparing to act out his cunning plan. He had decided to lure the witch in when he found her, slowly gain her trust, and casually undo the curse. Oh my. I have always dreamed of meeting a pagan folk. Tell me, why do you and the rest of the pagan practitioners still hold on to your old ways of doing things, even after joining the church? Is it because the rituals you perform are folk remnants of a time long gone by? William giddily questioned, partly interested in her answer. I am a pagan witch, she repeated, as her struggling words pierced the frigid wind. I know your true intentions, William Stevenson. The prince widened his eyes and gulped, as an icy shiver shot down his spine. He knew very well that it was not because of the cold atmosphere. He nervously chuckled as the realization that the words dripping off her scathing tongue were not to be taken lightly. How did you know my name? It is because I am the Prince of Willesden, correct? He stammered, sheepishly rubbing the nape of his neck. I just want to confirm. I have not upset you now, correct? The witch hugged her knees and lightly rocked back and forth, as the harsh wind rustled the trees' withering leaves overhead. There was a sort of haunting melody to the rustling, one that was not present before William met this strange woman. She licked her chapped lips and owlishly blinked up at the prince, who eyed her intently and stood completely still. I am a pagan witch. Tell me, William Stevenson, why do you seek me? She asked as her bony hands quivered intensely, which did not match the confidence in her raspy voice. The prince bit his lips and decided to tell the witch the truth. He did not want to take any risks as his brother did, and further curse the family. He knew that if he did, his brother would shame him more than the humiliation he received for bringing this unto the family in the first place. I came here on my king brother's behalf, who I am sure you are familiar with. He and I both want to ask you an important question. Why did you curse my family? William asked, discreetly inching backwards as he was slightly intimidated by the witch. I am a pagan witch and Wilson Stevenson provoked me. Are you here to do the same? The witch asked, leaning forward as she flared her violet eyes at him. William frantically waved his hands and shook his head, flustered. No, not at all. Why, you are a beautiful young lady. Mind you, I scolded my king brother relentlessly for creating a laughingstock out of a poor woman like you. I hope you know, since you seem to know a lot, that I am nothing like my king brother. I simply want to befriend you. William anxiously exclaimed as his heart rate quickened. Oh, how I wish I had agreed to Sir Patur coming alongside me. The pagan witch snorted and scratched the skin that was as gnarled as the woodland trees behind her. William smiled uneasily, unsure of whether that was a sardonic snort or a mirthful one. I am a pagan witch. I do know all. I know you are the same as your dearest brother. I know you do not want to befriend me, for I am a witch. I know that you enjoy milking cows rather than excellent. William hastily interjected, as his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. I deeply regret lying to you, but I was just being self-wary. William sheepishly chuckled. Although one thing is true. I truly am not here to mock you as my king brother did. In fact, I am here to strike a proposal. The witch raised her flaky eyebrows, although the prince was not sure whether she was intrigued or not. He decided to continue anyway. I promise to give you eons of rich lands, multiple enormous bags filled with gold coins, and a wonderful room in the dazzling castle for you to live in. It will be a drastic improvement compared to this place, the prince said, eyeing her uncomfortable living situation. In return, all you have to do is undo this inconvenient curse upon my family. That is all I ask, my lady. Do this one simple thing, and the royal family shall be at your beckoning call for the rest of your life. He boldly promised. The witch pondered for a moment, squinting her doe-violet eyes. She quietly hummed under her breath as she weighed the advantages of accepting this proposal. I suppose it sounds favorable, she muttered as the wind howled. William broke into a wide grin, pleased with himself. Indeed it is. First, undo the curse before my eyes, and everything shall be set in stone. However, there is a problem. A huge problem, she remarked, halting her swaying to look at William straight in the eyes. William dropped his outstretched arms and sighed. What problem, may I ask? He queried, biting his tongue to resist groaning out loud. Why does this always happen to me? I am a pagan witch. There is no undoing my curse, she nonchalantly stated. Prince William chortled, hoping the laughter would reverse her statement. To this cannot be true. This is a comical trickery, my lady. How hilarious. I have never taken you for the type to crack jokes in such a desperate situation. We are very much alike, the prince exclaimed, as his lungs expanded with laughter. However, his eyes were narrow with sternness. This is a joke, is it not, my lady? He asked, chuckling through gritted teeth. I am a pagan witch. There is no undoing my curse, she repeated, resuming her swaying. What is it that you want, that urges you to seek me and ask for the undoing of the curse I bestowed upon your family? I take it that you have no desire for children, and much rather enjoys the company of cows than family. The prince had no idea where the damn woman was going with this question, and it took many internal debates for him to continue his conversation with the trickster of a woman rather than running away to his cows. I do have the desire for a son of my own. I figure that if I have a child before my king brother, I shall be crowned king so that my son can become the official heir, he explained, clenching his fists. The witch nodded, as she ran her shaking hands through her string-like hair. Allow me to propose this. I am a pagan witch. There is no undoing my curse. However, I can create another curse so that you can achieve the subject of your desire. William's lips parted with surprise, and he nodded eagerly. Whatever it is, I agree. I shall do anything if it means I can receive a son to outrank my elder brother. The witch's leather lips curved into a playful smile and her glistening violet eyes smirked. Do remember that this is a curse nonetheless. Take some time before coming to hasty decision, William Stevenson. There are dire consequences to my curses. I hope you have learned. Do not think this will be simple, because for centuries to come, you will be chained to this curse like the slaves in your castle. The prince ignored the witch and stared off into the distance. A huge smile plastered on his beaming face. This is it. This is it. The moment I have been longing for my entire life. Who knew seeking a witch would have such a good outcome as this? He returned his gaze towards the witch and cheerfully clapped his hands. What is it, my lady? What is this blessing you will bestow unto me? She tilted her head up and eyed William with a smug interest. You shall see soon. I will not create this second curse until you give me the wealth you promised, William Stevenson. The prince jumped up to his feet earnestly. Of course. Whatever you desire, my lady. He outstretched his hand for the witch to grab onto. Let us go immediately. I shall show you around your new home. The witch curled her bony fingers around the prince's hand and stood up. When she stood on her wobbly legs, she graced at an extremely short height. William placed his free hand on her slender shoulder, pulling her close and inspecting her leathery face. Tell me, my lady, what shall I call you? He asked, smiling down at her. The witch flashed William a grin, her icy violet eyes gleaming up at him. That too will be revealed in some time, William Stevenson.